Hello, I'm Isaac.
I'm Alexandria Kendrick.
I'm James Long.
And I'm Shannon Miller. Today we'll be discussing the stigma surrounding gifted and talented education.
The problem with gifted education isn't the program itself, but the strong stigma surrounding it. And thus, by this we mean students enrolled are deeply affected. Main factors include biases from teachers and peers, higher standards that they are held at, and high rates of mental and emotional problems later in life.
With this trend, students may not want to even continue or become involved with gifted education for fear of being bullied or ridiculed.
Furthering this includes culturally, linguistically, and economically diverse students, otherwise known as CLED, teacher biases, and access to education. Due to such problems, we chose to delve deeper and develop our main question of research.
What is the stigma around gifted and talented education, and how does it impact the students in and around them? Educationally, gifted and talented programs are of the most socially segregated in the United States. Unfortunately, some public schools in the United States strive to provide an individualized education, but often fail to do it well. Total separation of environments of gifted classes and non-gifted classes can lead to social isolation. Losing intimacy with the group suppresses their intellectual abilities, and for many, choosing to have friends outside the gifted and talented programs means they suppress their abilities, dumbing it down to relate to them. This can cause social and emotional disadvantages to gifted students, says researchers Yuhan Xu and Bradley K. Myers of GSTF International Journal of Law and Social Sciences. Sabrina Bloss of the University of Queensland, Australia, states some disadvantages are the inability to control their own feelings, thoughts, depression, anxiety, poor social adjustments, poor self-regulation skills, lacking confidence, over-perfectionism, and a range of negative emotions. A reason for this might be gifted students are mocked in popular culture just for their exceptional traits, being called nerd or brainiac. Nancy B. Herzog, a professor of educational psychology and writer of Impact of Gifted Programs from Students' Perspectives, reflects and examines the acceptance of the gifted label. Of 155 middle school age adolescents 11 to 14 labeled, 84 reported extreme discomfort. 40% of all gifted students felt different from their peers.
In the article, The Psychosocial Concerns and Needs of Gifted Students, Linda E. Brody says that clinicians saw youth experiencing difficulties. Even though they are well-adjusted, students with gifted status are still vulnerable to the same problems that their peers are too. Some problems are caused by their high abilities, developmental issues, and feeling too different than their peers. Some more are prone to others, says Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. And by this, students gifted in reading are more prone to develop problems than students in math, and the same goes for CLED students overall.
Although, according to Sabrina Bloss of the relationship between social and emotional difficulties and underachievement of gifted students, states the research over the years is thought to be fraught with gaps and inconsistencies. Also, with the students being young in their research studies, the evidence has a lack of consent. Gifted programs also provide an unrealistic standards of students. For example, increasing dropout rates and expectations. Educators tend not to worry about their gifted students, claiming that these bright students will understand the material regardless, says Yuhan Xu and Bradley K. Myers.
There's a positive correlation between poor social emotional development and scholastic underachievement in gifted students, says the Australian Council for Educational Research in 2010. Gifted burnout is the physical and mental collapse of students caused by overwork and stress due to exceedingly high expectations.
According to the article, When Choices Foster Inequality, Can Research Help? By Jennifer B. Askew, Genevieve Siegel-Hawley, Brian Woodward, and Gary Siegel, when students are separated for their intelligence, studies show that those students are double as likely to drop out of that gifted program. This means that in instances where gifted and talented students attend another building or a separate classroom for a full day, that they are less likely to stay in that program.
The unrealistic standards forced upon the students involved in outside of gifted education has led to increased dropout rates in recent years. In the study, Bounding the Impact of a Gifted Program on Student Retention Using a Modified Regression Discontinuity Design by Billy Davis et al., it states, urban districts in Buffalo, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia have lost thousands of students over the last several decades. This could be associated with a decrease in state funding, which is based on a per-pupil basis, and a lower local tax base due to a declining urban population.
Yet, a study done by Robertson in 1991 showed that 18 to 25% of gifted students dropped out. But a study done by Renzulli and Park in 2002, they saw that about only 5% of kids dropped out, proving the opposite of gifted burnout.
There's also a lack of diversity in gifted and talented programs. For example, culturally, linguistically, and economically diverse students, also known as CLED, access to education, and teacher unconscious bias. Talented minority students face and suffer an even more intense stigma.
In a study from Jennifer Askew, this shows the percentage of students enrolled in honors programs in Buffalo, New York was 66% Caucasian, meaning a little over 1/4 involved in gifted education were a race other than white. They also showed the two predominant races involved in gifted education are Caucasian and Asian. With this type of lack of diversity, the gifted education system is mainly one-sided in ethnicity. Looking forward, this means that the jobs and positions of business and civic leaders will be held by mainly Caucasian and Asian persons, maintaining the current lack of diversity we see today.
Outlined in the 1964 case Brown v. Board of Education, as well as the much more recent 2013 case McFadden v. Board of Education for Illinois School District U46, segregation holds no place within a school's gifted education program, as it can cause severe disconnections within the student body and is considered illegal and unconstitutional. In the McFadden case, the school district was attempting to use school funding to ratify the creation of a Hispanic-only gifted program, violating the equal protection clauses found in both the United States and Illinois Constitution. As expressed in the article No Blacks Allowed, Segregated Gifted Education in the Context of Brown v. Board of Education by Donna Y. Ford and Robert A. King, Jr. of Vanderbilt University, Brown v. Board of Education was 6 decades ago, and this law and associated legal mandates has yet to be fulfilled, particularly in gifted education, advanced placement classes, and other courses for advanced learner, e.g. honors and international baccalaureate classes. It is constantly shown that underrepresentation is very present within the gifted student body, which may be a result of culturally biased tests. In the same article by Ford and King Jr., it is found that in 2006, Black students comprised 17.13% of school districts, but 9.15% of gifted education enrollment, which is 47% under enrollment based on the RDCI. In all years, white students are overrepresented in gifted education. For example, white students represented 56.42% of schools, but 67.69% of gifted education enrollment in 2006. Asian students are also overrepresented. On the topic of culturally biased tests, historically, identification was categorized by IQ scores due to the simplicity and clean data it provides. However, this data, along with cutoff points, results in a certain track-light aspect to identification. But it's understandable to say that identification tests may naturally be biased no matter how they advance, due to having to find an efficient way to acquire clean data to use. Also, some may say that these diversity issues have already been federally addressed at an earlier point. In the same article by Ford and King, it is brought up that the inclusion of potentially gifted is the most culturally responsive and therefore an equitable aspect of the 1978 and 1993 federal definitions of giftedness. This includes Black students, underachievers, economically disadvantaged students, and students with special educational challenges.
Moving on to our solution. Gifted education provides educational segregation, separating students socially and mentally from others. It also provides unrealistic standards, pushing gifted burnout, and minority students, specifically in CLEB, being biased against. This sparks a controversy of gifted and talented programs being beneficial to student well-being. Where do these programs need to head? How can we make gifted students equal to a regular student standard? As a result of our research, to conclude, we have found 3 viable solutions, which are funding school districts to include and accommodate for gifted students, allowing an opt-in or opt-out of the gifted programs to reduce stress and standards, training teachers to meet student ability, and changing the gifted and talented test to no longer bias against the minority. Offering to fund school districts that separate gifted students out of the normal classroom and making them now introduce the gifted kids into the original environment, while also accommodating for their education, can reduce the social segregation. There are 2 methods of gifted programs in the 20th century, says Yihan Shu and Bradley K. Myers, and when we combine the regular class and the gifted class and any other, we do not. Gifted students need to be given the full opportunity and ability to challenge their education while not being left out. Gifted students need to be included and funding backed. Individualization and richer curriculum should be integrated for all students to benefit.
Another solution is to allow it to be easier to opt in/out for gifted education programs. With the current infrastructure, it is very difficult for a gifted child to exit or join the program once they've entered due to the timing of when they join. A student is usually identified at an elementary school level of education after they become age 6, according to the National Association for Gifted Children. This extremely early introduction of a child into said programs can provide many different complications. It can severely hurt a student who perhaps does not excel academically anymore after joining the program, and this can severely strain them. On the other hand, students who bloom academically later than others may never get the accommodations they need to reach full potential because of their late identification.
Another potential solution could be finding a new way to change and distribute tests in a way to train teachers to distribute these tests.
A different test that recognizes talent in a broader view and a test that disregards race, economic standing, and language. In some scenarios, one test would not be enough and to truly determine an individual's talent, and many tests could be used.
To conclude, the stigma of gifted education is quite immense. Gifted students are segregated by mental capability, selected and biased against because of race, and provided unrealistic standards.
This is what leads to an array of problems evident in the gifted children. It causes them to be anxious, feel left out, and feel lesser to their peers. Gifted burnout is an actual problem relevant to our education in America.
However, it is not only the gifted children we need to be doing this for. If we continue to provide unsuccessful and inefficient accommodations for those who need them, the future that they pay for those who don't will be one of misused potential.
Whether a student is gifted or not, the current level of discrimination in and around these programs is harmful to all students as individuals. With such harsh effects on things like dropout rates, discrimination, and negative effects on mental health, a stigma like this is detrimental to programs intended on highlighting one's talent. Thank you.
Okay, good job. Shannon, what was the strongest counter-argument to the solution or conclusion that your team identified?
I believe the strongest counter-argument was to the third claim, which was diversity within gifted programs. And that counter-argument was that even though if there are culturally biased tests, it's hard not to have a culturally biased test since you are searching for a very, let's say, not defined definition of giftedness. And if you're trying to find clean and effective data, you have to cut some corners and you need to reach that. Also, part of that counter-argument was that there was already federal mentions of gifted diversity, and one could say that if it's already mentioned multiple times in federal ways, then how much farther can you go?
Okay. Isaac, can you give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of the things that you learned from Shannon's findings?
Through Shannon's findings, my thoughts actually changed on the way that gifted programs actually haven't quite been changed throughout the course of history, given that he brought up Brown v. Board of Education. It shows kind of like how scary it is being a gifted child in America without knowing like how diverse your class could actually be or what you're being shoved into. And like you said, with the opt-in and opt-out programs, like once you're in, and it's really hard to get out. So if you're really struggling, it also is a scary statistic to realize like how hard it is to get out of that program.
Okay. Alex, what is one way that your team's conclusion made you think differently about your own individual research?
Specifically, my own individual research was mostly the environmental ones. So looking into, let's say, Shannon's with the political and historical, I saw very differently about how culturally biased things can be.
Okay. James, in the future, what change would you make to your group norms, and how would you expect that to improve the presentation?
I think with any group project, especially in high school, there's certain types of I guess, character roles that each person files into, whether it's the person who does not want to do the work or the person who does all the work, and with every presentation you're going to have certain factors like that. So I like to think that this was more different than your stereotypical group project in, say, your normal academic classes. However, I do know that some of us, including myself, fell into some of those roles. So I think looking forward, I would say that we would need more time to collaborate and maybe even make it a requirement, per se, to meet outside of school to work on the project.
Okay, thank you.